There was a young boy named David who was just 10 years old and loved playing soccer with his friends after school. David also enjoyed reading adventure books and drawing superheroes. He was in primary school and full of energy and curiosity about the world. However, his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Adams, were often too busy to spend much time with him. They owned a bustling grocery store in the center of town and worked long hours to provide for David and give him a good life. Most afternoons, David would come home to an empty house. The school bus dropped him off at 3 p.m., and he would be alone until 6 p.m. when his mother returned from work. "I feel so lonely at home," David told his parents one evening. His father looked up from his plate of food and sighed. "We're sorry, David. It's only for a few hours, and we're working hard to give you everything you need." David understood, but deep down, he wished they had more time for him. One evening, Mrs. Adams came up with an idea. "David," she said, "why don't you stay with Aunt Megan next door until we get home? She's very kind, and she'll take good care of you." Aunt Megan was their neighbor, a cheerful woman in her early 30s who lived alone. She often greeted David with a warm smile. Whenever she saw him, "All right, Mommy," David said hesitantly. He was familiar with Aunt Megan, but staying at someone else's house felt a little strange at first. The next day, David went to Aunt Megan's house after school. Her home was small but cozy, filled with colorful decorations and the smell of freshly baked cookies. "Welcome, David," Aunt Megan said, beaming. "How was school today?" David shrugged shyly, but Aunt Megan's warmth soon put him at ease. She offered him a plate of spaghetti and meatballs, his favorite dish, and let him watch cartoons on her TV. Over the next few days, David started enjoying his time there. Aunt Megan told funny stories about her childhood and even helped David with his homework. One afternoon, Aunt Megan gave him a surprise gift, a brand new soccer ball. "This is for you, David," she said. "You're like the nephew I never had." "Thank you, Aunt Megan," David said with a big smile. But as time went on, things began to change. One day, after David had finished his homework, Aunt Megan sat down beside him on the couch. "David," she said softly, "let's play a special game. It's our little secret, okay?" David was confused, but nodded hesitantly. At first, the game seemed harmless, but soon Aunt Megan started doing things that made David feel very uncomfortable. He didn't understand what was happening, but knew, deep down, that it didn't feel right. "I don't like this game," David said quietly. "Don't worry," Aunt Megan replied with a reassuring smile. "You'll understand soon." David felt trapped. He didn't know how to explain what was happening, and the more time he spent at Aunt Megan's house, the more uneasy he became. At night, David began waking up to find his bed wet, something that hadn't happened in years. He felt ashamed and scared, but didn't know who to talk to. One day at school, his teacher, Mrs. Okafor, noticed that David wasn't his usual cheerful self. "David, is everything okay?" she asked gently. David hesitated, staring at the floor. Finally, Mrs. Okafor called him aside after class. "You can tell me anything," she said, with a kind smile. Tears welled up in David's eyes. "It's Aunt Megan," he whispered. "She does things that make me feel bad." Mrs. Okafor listened carefully and reassured him. "Thank you for telling me, David. You're very brave. This is not your fault, and I'll make sure you get the help you need." Mrs. Okafor immediately informed the school counselor and principal, who contacted David's parents. When Mr. and Mrs. Adams learned what had been happening, they were devastated. "We're so sorry, David," his mother said, hugging him tightly. "We should have been there for you. We'll make sure this never happens again," his father promised. The family went to the police to report Aunt Megan. David shared his story with the compassionate officer, who assured him that he had done the right thing. Aunt Megan was arrested, and the truth about her actions came to light. Determined to make things better, David's parents adjusted their work schedules so that one of them was always home when David returned from school. They also took him to a counselor who helped him process his feelings and regain his confidence. Over time, David's nightmares stopped, and he began to feel like himself again. He returned to playing soccer with his friends, laughing and smiling. Like before, one day, he approached Mrs. Okafor at school. "Thank you for helping me," he said sincerely. "You're very brave, David," she replied with a warm smile. "Never forget that it's always okay to speak up when something feels wrong." From that day on, David carried an important lesson with him. There are always people who will listen, support, and protect you when you need help. And he knew he would never be afraid to speak up again. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my story. I want to read from you. Where are you watching from? And how does this story resonates with you? What do you think about this story? Comment below, share, and like this video. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye for now.